Daniel, let's go back a little bit to some other lies and myths. It's just even difficult to know where to start. So we've got this whole thing about how, okay, so we've discussed there's this falsehood about Israeli genocide, there's this falsehood about Israeli apartheid. But now, even the foundations that these Palestinian people have always been there, and that there was some kind of Palestinian state, that somehow land was stolen from the Palestinians. It's hard to know where to start because the Palestinians, just even the term, this is a KGB creation that came around in the mid 1960s. These are Arabs. And just like Jordan, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, Israel was created on land that originally belonged to the Turks. They're carving out the Ottoman Empire. So let's just begin with that. There's never any land taken from anybody. This is land left over, just like I said, those other countries were created. And the UN partition plan of 1947, the Arabs are offered a state, the Jews are offered a state. Take it from there.
Well, we get one state, they talk about the two-state solution. The second state already exists. It's called the Kingdom of Jordan. But we can go back before that, for that matter. You have a gentleman on Twitter who told me today, a Muslim gentleman, that the Palestinians are absolutely legitimate because they have a Canaanite Philistine DNA, and the Philistines were actually from the Aegean region in Europe, so they're European. The Canaanites are an Iron Age people. This kind of thing is nonsense. It's like claiming that the Arab Muslims who invaded Egypt are the original ancient Egyptians. They're not. The Arab Muslims who invaded Israel and moved in there are not some sort of ancient indigenous people. They're colonists and invaders. Some of this happened a while back. Some of this actually happened in the 18th and 19th centuries, particularly once the British came in. There were economic opportunities that opened up, and a whole bunch of people from around the area from Egypt showed up, and you can tell that they're from Egypt because they have names like Masri, and Masri means Egyptian in Arabic. So on and so forth, Suri, which means Syrian. So these are people from the surrounding Arab countries, but they weren't actually countries back then. We hear names like Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, and we think these are the actual countries you hear about in the Bible. They're not. They're countries that were carved out on maps by the British and the French back after World War One. They drew lines on the map. They try to create particular countries that would be dominated by some of their political allies, Arab tribes, who had fought with them against the Ottoman Empire. And the Jews had also fought against the Ottoman Empire. And as a result, they had lines on the map for a Jewish state, various Arab states that would be dominated by friendly Arab tribes. This is where the origin of the current map really comes from. So the Arab Muslims themselves had obviously invaded the area back in the day, but various tribes moved in and out, and there was really not a large Arab Muslim presence until very recently. There was more of a Christian presence, actually, which makes perfect sense because it was a holy land for Jews and Christians. It was not really much of a holy land for Muslims. Ramallah, which is the biggest city in the so-called Palestinian Authority, their capital, was originally founded by Christians who were fleeing persecution, I believe, in the 17th or 18th century. So there really isn't that much of an Arab Muslim history there. The Arab Muslim presence there is really escalated under British rule, at which point those Arab Muslims began engaging in violence against Jews, persecution against Jews, leading into what we have today. This is not a question of Jews coming in and taking somebody else's land. First of all, Jews were the indigenous population there, as much as any people there can claim to be an indigenous population. By the way, you have Jews there, you have Samaritans, you do have some ancient peoples there. The Arab Muslims are not among those ancient peoples. The Bedouins are the closest that come to it, and a whole lot of them are actually on Israel's side. Some of them were actually massacred on October 7th. One of the stories we're not really hearing is that Bedouins were being massacred by the Hamas attackers. The bottom line, though, again, is that when the Jews came in, when the Jews actually moved to Israel, they bought land. They took land that nobody else wanted, because much of what the Arab Muslim population was doing is they were cultivating olive trees, and they had their herds of goats who were and sheep who were nibbling out and eliminating much of the grassland. They weren't doing any kind of more sustained agriculture for the most part. It was the Jews who came in, drained swamps, made the desert boom. It's cliches, but this actually happened. You look at accounts from 19th century travelers, like, say, Mark Twain, who came there and said there was pretty much nothing there. It's all abandoned. It's a barren wasteland. So they put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears making that happen. They created sustained agriculture. They built up cities, and they made the land actually livable, at which point, of course, it attracted more Arab Muslims who were very interested in being part of it and in taking over the land. So to whatever extent somebody took somebody else's land, it was the Arab Muslim invaders who did that. They did that in the original War of Independence in 1948, when Jews were ethnically cleansed from half of Jerusalem. And now when the Jews actually try to move back into that part of Jerusalem, the international community, including the Biden administration, starts complaining that the Jews are displacing the Arab Muslims who are only living there because they took the actual houses of the Jews who are living there. So we have this absurd situation where any place that Arab Muslims ever take over is theirs eternally. This is obviously the Islamic position. That's why you have this claim that Spain really belongs to Islam and will be reclaimed by Islam eventually once again. And then parts of maybe France and Italy as well that were at one point claimed by Muslims. But Jews, no matter what kind of how deep, how ancient their history in this land, no matter what their rights to this land are never actually have any rights there. So the Jews are always illegitimate. People who are not Muslims are always illegitimate in the land, but the Arab Muslims are automatically always legitimate. And this is an Islamic double standard that a lot of leftists have accepted as gospel truth.